And when he heard what Korah and the other Levite leaders were saying about him, he fell on his face and he went to God in prayer. It's a sad thing when you take someone's humbleness for weakness. When you do that, you are simply asking for trouble. But this is what Korah did. And in doing this, he made a serious miscalculation in judgment. He failed to accept the fact that Moses was indeed anointed and appointed by God. And it's a dangerous thing when you mess with God's servant who is anointed and appointed. You are just asking for trouble. You're about to put yourself in a position for a serious biblical beatdown. For the Bible declares, touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm. And so in their disagreement with Moses, Korah and some of the other Levites decided to take matters in their own hands and engage in what I call a spiritual conspiracy. And as a result of this rebellion, God was about to give Korah a serious religious whipping. You know, Pastor, when I was growing up, my grandfather, who I grew up with, I was a little rascal that got in trouble often. And I used to get whippings when I was younger. I don't know if they give whippings, they give spankings and time out. I got a whipping when I was younger. And my grandfather used to tell me two things. The first thing he would say is, now, boy, this is going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. Now, I couldn't understand that. How is me getting a whipping going to hurt him more than it's going to hurt me? The second thing he said is, a good whipping won't take long. God was about to give Korah a good whipping, and it wasn't going to take long. The crazy thing about this whole story is the fact that Korah and the other Levites had already been given a prime position in the church. They were selected as the tribe of Israel to serve in a very important position in the church. It was them that were allowed, and only them, that were allowed to assist the priests and serve the people in various sacred ceremonies and sacraments in the temple. But Korah wanted more. In fact, he wanted a part of the priesthood. He was determined to gain a position of leadership that God had neither called for him nor chosen for him. Right. And what Korah failed to realize is that what God has for you is for you. In Galatians 6 and 9, Paul puts it like this: let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. Your requirement as a child of God is to be faithful over a few things, and watch God make you ruler over many. Whatever God has called you to do, that is what you need to find yourself doing. Paul says, I know how to be abased and to abound. I know how to be abased and to be abound. I know how to be hungry and full both at the same time. He says, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Korah did not understand this particular approach to ministry. And because of his greed, because of his desire for power, his eagerness to get out of his lane, he rebelled against Moses. And when he did that, he also rebelled against God. Why? Because Moses was called by God. And when Korah rebelled against Moses, God destroyed him and 250 other Levite leaders of that generation. As a matter of fact, God was so angry with Korah and the other leaders that he was going to destroy the entire generation of Levites. In the same 16th chapter of Numbers, verses 20 and 21, we read this: and the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I might consume them in a moment. Whew. When I think about a moment, I think about some distant place in time. I think about maybe later on this afternoon, maybe tonight. Some people might even say a moment. I'll see you in a moment, meaning tomorrow. When God says to Moses and Aaron, separate yourselves, that I might consume them in a moment. He's not talking about later on. His moment is right now. His moment is instantaneously. His moment is within a nanosecond. As a matter of fact, in my understanding, the moment has already happened. He's just waiting for Moses to get out the way. Moses is blocking God from taking care of business. My Lord. He says, separate yourselves, that I might consume them in a moment. God was so, I pray that God never gets so angry with me that he wants to consume me in a moment. But this is what God says, separate yourselves that I might consume them in a moment. But look at what Moses does, and this is the epitome of good leadership. Moses actually intercedes on the behalf of Korah and the people that wanted to destroy him. That's good leadership. Even when you know that people don't have your best interests at heart, even when you know they're talking about you behind your back, even when you know they're trying to sabotage every effort that you're doing, you not only pray for them, but you sincerely beseech God on their behalf and pray that he will spare their lives. In other words, you stand in the gap for your enemy. That's not just good leadership. That's godly leadership. So Moses said to God, God, let not the sin of this one man cause you to be angry with his entire generation. And God said to Moses, then tell the descendants of these men to separate themselves from among them that they might live. So Moses and Aaron rushes to the descendants of Korah and the other Levite leaders and pleads with them, separate yourselves that you might live, that you might not be destroyed. And some of them did listen, and some of them moved off to the side. But Korah and some of the other leaders decided that they were going to stand right there in the midst of Moses' warning and in the midst of God's anger. And this would prove to be a dangerous and fatal decision. So Moses said to the people, on this day, God is going to do a new thing. So he said, all of you who think that I have been called by God, I want you to come on this side. And all of you who think that I have not been called by God, I want you to go on the other side. And today you're going to watch God do a new thing. And he said, if God is not with me, then Korah and the other leaders are going to live a long life. And they're going to grow old and die of natural causes. They're going to have a good life if God has not called me. And then he said, but on the other hand, if God has called me, then the earth is going to open up and they're going to be swallowed in. And do you not know, as soon as Moses finished speaking, the earth opened up and they were swallowed in and the earth covered them. What struck me about this story is the fact that once Moses had made his appeal and God had made up his mind, Korah never had another chance to repent. And he was gone in a flash. But because of the intercession of Moses, some of the descendants of Korah were saved. And in fact, these descendants remained faithful to Moses and Aaron and continued to serve God in the temple. Hundreds of years later, David would in fact appoint some of these very same men, the descendants of Korah, to serve as choir leaders and musicians. And no doubt this story of Korah and his rebellion passed on from generation to generation. And hundreds of years later, the descendants of Korah are here now recording this 42nd Psalm. In this psalm, the descendants of Korah are taking us on a spiritual journey. And they are helping us to see from their perspective how important it is not only to seek the salvation of God, but to maintain a determined state of obedience in order to remain in God's presence. The